Hello everybody, so I hope you are all keeping really well. So we're going to have a quick discussion on workbench heights. Now, what prompted this really was I picked up a book and it's just a second-hand one. I thought I'd take a punt on that, see if there's some interesting information in it. And most people are looking for like a definitive idea on workbench height. And I've always found that to be ridiculous because we're all different heights, weights, shapes. We all like doing different things. So how can you work out exactly how to make the perfect bench for you? And in just like a small paragraph, this book nails it, absolutely nails it. Okay, the workbench height should be regulated by the character of the work. High for lighter work, which makes sense, and low for heavy, as well as the height of the person who's to use it. Carpenter's benches are usually about 33 inches high is the proposal, while those of the cabinet and pattern makers are from 2 to 4 inches higher. Okay, so that's quite interesting. And this book I think is from 1887. I think that's a 1902 publishing. That book is a topic that we'll delve into at another time. And I thought, wow, for all the hot air and all the books and research that have been done over the years, that really cut through for me, and I thought that's a great piece of advice. But hey, it's a video, let's talk a bit more about it. So, what heights are you going to build your workbench? What's going to be good for you? Like it says in there are no perfect formulas. I think most people who get into woodworking seriously probably end up building more than one bench quite often. Maybe not, it's a bit of extravagance to do that, but it's not unheard of. But I would certainly recommend that a decent bench is essential to doing any kind of work, You can't be faffing around on trestles or all the rest of it. You can get over it, but very soon you're going to get frustrated. So I'd recommend building a really simple bench for starters. Something like the kind of English joiners benches that you see, or the British joiners benches, however you want to describe them. The ones with those big wide aprons. Piece of cake to make. Don't over engineer them, don't overthink them, keep them really simple. And to work out the height, I personally wouldn't worry about a measurement from a book. I would look at yourself as a human being, your size. Now, I personally would stand and I would look and think, well, my wristwatch, if I were to be wearing one, which I'm not, would finish about here, and I'd finish it about roughly where the top of my wristwatch is, so probably a little bit higher than what I've got here. Okay, there are some guides which say your pinky, to me that's unusual, this is just a little finger, stand, relax down by your sides, and where it joins your hand, that's going to be the right height. Now for me, you can see here, that's just going to be far too low, and this is a preference I've been working with for years, so I'm not going to change. I'm not suffering pain, I'm absolutely fine with it. So you can see there's about a 4-inch variance here, and if I'd made this thing 4 inches too short, I'd have been like, oh, now I've got to screw blocks on it. I'm relatively happy with how this looks, that'd be disappointing. But with something like a British joiner's bench, if you make that a little bit tall, the design is so easy, there's like a nice bit of distance underneath the stretcher on the leg. You can just chop off a little bit at a time. Initially your joints and all your practice is going to be practicing on practice joints, making small detail projects, and that bit of extra height will probably be quite nice. And you might never want to change that, but if you do, just lay the bench on the side, trim off a 1/2 inch at a time, and see how you feel about it. Okay, I think that for me, that's how I'd go about it. But let's delve into a few other things as well. So there are a couple of paintings that you could look at. No doubt there's loads of others, but these ones to me are quite realistic. So they show some good information in there that you can do a bit of detective work with. There's one I'll link to, I think it's called The Painters at 40 Hill. Not the painters, the woodworkers at 40 Hill, or the carpenter's shop at 40 Hill. And when you look at that painting, you'll see some joiners working away there, and you've got a guy in the foreground bent over his bench doing some detailed work, and you've got a guy in the background using a plane. And what's quite nice about that is you can kind of see his whole movements, or you can at least make a fair estimation of it, see what's kind of going on with everything. And certainly with the guy using the plane, he's not really bent over. He's not really spread his legs to get over it like some crazy arachnid. He looks comfortable, he's doing what he needs to do, and he's just taking some shavings. You can see the plane with the shaving coming out the throat of the plane as he works. Okay, so you can take a look at that. You could try, if you wanted to, using your kitchen table at home or something, kind of recreate holding a hand plane, some bits of wood, and recreate that stance. And you could do the same with the painting, which I think a guy called George Forster did, which again is a joiner's workshop. Again, the guy planing in that one, it's like there's a lesson in what you should, in like by the book, in my estimations, look like when you're planing. His footwork is brilliant. It's like, I used to do a bit of martial arts, never particularly good at it, but I did some. He's got like a nice kind of L fighting stance, so his one of his feet, the back leg, is pointing towards the bench. His other one is there forward, so he's got that kind of to push forwards, and he just looks comfortable. He's not over the top of anything, and you can imagine him just stepping through, you know? Because remember, if you've got sharp tools, especially the plane, that will just pull itself to the job most of the time, you know? If you're having to force it down, your plane's blunt, right? The weight of the plane, especially some of the more modern ones like some of the modern bedrocks, which are even heavier than these Baileys, they just grab themselves down, so you should never have to be pushing down. You know, it should never be something you have to worry about too much. So take a look at those paintings. I'll link those in the description. In addition, you can look at some books. Touched on that book there, that'll be a separate discussion. Incredible little book. And we've got people like Hayward, George Ellis, that book that I like about practical home woodworking. George Ellis says that, you know, about 28 inches. For me, that would be like, it's far too low for me. That book is focusing on making architectural joinery and shop fronts and things of that nature. So you need to think to yourself, am I going to be making a staircase, shop front, architectural joinery, yes or no? If the answer is no, that's an interesting thing to see a height of what that bench would be, but does it apply to you? The other ones are like the Hayward one and the practical home woodworking one. They're usually, I think, about 30 to 33 inches. Again, that would be too low for me. I don't know whether that's because I've got a mix of metal and wooden planes, so your hand's a little bit lower on a metal plane, higher on a wooden one. Could be, might not be. But personally, it would be too low. So that's the danger. You can get dragged into thinking by the book. And it's the same with modern books on the subject of woodworking. You could buy that and you could think, that's the size, that's the height I need to do. But as that book says, okay, we're all different. So you need to tailor it to you and what you do, which is critically important. Okay, so there's a few other things that we could look at. There is a rule that people will adhere to, and I'm sure it works well for some. For me, it would have been a big mistake to follow this, is using kind of the pinkies fingers as a bit of a reference. So if you stand by your bench, standing there, and you've got your pinky where it joins onto your hand, that pretty much for me is like the underside of my bench top. So we've got about 4 inches. For me, that'd be, my bench was 4 inches too low, and that would be, it just wouldn't work. It would be a real mess. And that's why urging you earlier on to think about, well, if it's your first bench, build it a little bit taller and trim it back to suit. Because if it's your first bench, and a lot of people are in a situation where they can either buy something nice or they can make something really nice, if you splash out all of that on like really nice timber, hardware, all the rest of it, you find out, God, this is really killing my back. All this hand tool woodworking I thought would be so much fun. It's just neck pain, back pain, I don't feel right. And then you've got to think, well, I've now got to put some fancy wooden boots on my bench. And if you've made the bench to a furniture quality level, which some people do, I think they're probably going to have a mental breakdown. So that rule for me is a non-starter. Again, that flexibility in your bench design to adjust it by trimming the legs off a bit, really, really helpful. So the whole pinky thing, for me personally, an absolute non-starter. There's also, we can look at what some professionals say. And by professionals, I'm talking about people who actually made furniture in volume and to a very high standard. We all know who those kind of people are. The first one I'll pick out is Alan Peters, OBE. Do a bit of research online, and he's got a wonderful book that if you can find a copy, buy it. It's lovely. It's furniture making, I think the modern approach or something of that nature. And he rather cuttingly puts in there that most commercial benches are probably made for little people, but because the book's a little bit old, he uses what we would probably call a slur these days. And he's with the benches that he would buy, because he, in his opinion, it's like, I'm a furniture maker, I don't mind whether I buy or build a bench, and his instruction is neither should you, do whatever you want. I'm here to make things, not make benches. The commercial benches that he bought were on risers that were 4 to 6 inches higher than what they came. So you can see there, which kind of chimes in with that book that we looked at earlier, he's probably getting close to 40 inches at a guess. I don't know how tall he was. I don't think he was a giant. And yeah, he made wonderful, wonderful work and was recognised for it. He wasn't somebody who was just, you know, a bit of a hobbyist or doing basic stuff. This guy made exquisite pieces. The other guy you can look at as someone you might be more familiar with is a guy called Frank Klaus. I'll kind of try and link to one of his videos below. In that one, he's making a drawer, I think, for a Queen Anne lowboy. And I personally think Frank is an absolute legend. I love the way he's got that lovely balance between not being arrogant, but being really confident and excellent at what he does and presenting it in such a wonderful way. And what I found interesting in his video was that he's got a traditional Scandinavian style bench, and he's working away on his drawers, and I'll link to hopefully the correct part in the video. 24 minutes in, he switches over to a higher bench, and he's lucky because he's got space to do that. I don't. He can do some other work on it, which just goes to show if you've got to make a compromise, you know, you've got to work in different ways. So seeing someone experienced work in that way, I think it was he had to do some chopping, so he moved to a higher level. When he was doing some sawing, he felt more comfortable to work at a lower level. So you can look at some professionals, and like I said, if you're going to look at professionals, do it with somebody who's maybe making something that you like the look of, or someone who has been doing it for a while. I can call myself a professional woodworker because I'm a trained carpenter and joiner. I've done that since I've left school. But I'll be honest with you, my day-to-day activities don't include always being stood at a bench doing all of this. I did my apprenticeship, and you learn all the hand-cut joinery. You practice that until you're competent. Then you move to machine work and a blend of hand and machine work when necessary. But it's not, you know, wooden jack planes, moulding planes, tenon saws every day. It's such a mixed bag. And that's the thing to remember also, is that for those people who want that kind of pre-industrial feel to their woodworking, to find people out there now who are working that way, who come from like a lineage of working that way, it's going to be very difficult to find them. There's some people that look like they do, but they don't, from what I can see of it, because once you've broken that link between the past and how things were done and now, it's very hard to recapture it. There's one guy on a woodworking forum. I'd love to spend some time with him. I'm pretty sure he's pretty mustard, but apart from that, I don't see many people doing it in that pre-industrial way. I can't believe we're still talking about workbench heights. It's really not that complicated. Okay, so some other things, some signs you're getting it wrong. Okay, so hopefully I don't look too clumsy when I plane. Hopefully not. You know, I might. I have no idea. I don't normally watch myself. Okay, but I feel that I've got control and I'm comfortable. Okay, and I'm not planing up a piece of like 1 inch thick pine in a vise. Okay, so that's still not much effort, but at least it's a bit of hardwood. All right, but I feel comfortable in what I'm doing. What I'm not doing is having to really spread my legs to drop myself down and then really get my back over and really push down on it. What I'm doing, hopefully, is with my hand there, is I'm pushing forwards. Again, I could use that if I want, but I seem to use that more, and then just pushing it forward. And out come the shavings. And that's not prescriptive because we use hand planes in a varying amount of ways. Okay, lots of different ways. It's not just a textbook way of bit of wood, bench stop, shavings, project finished. All right, there's lots of more complicated stuff than that. So yeah, that kind of bent over, really like, so you look like some kind of strange arachnid trying to get, and then you're planing up and your wood's dancing all over the place. It's because you've probably got no control. All right, because you don't have to force a plane down to do any cutting. It's just not needed. If that thing's sharp, it's just going to pull itself into the cut. It just wants to bite, and it wants to go into the wood. You've pretty much just got to steer it. If you're having to push it in, it's too blunt. And especially some of the more modern planes where the bedrock design is now very popular, they tend to be a touch heavier, so there should be no excuse. That mother should be driving itself down. All right. So there's that to bear in mind. And again, touching on that, the other things is that, you know, back pain, neck pain. Are you finding it uncomfortable to just work at a bench? If you're of normal health, if you've already got physical ailments, then fair dues, it's going to be hard to work that out. But if you're reasonably healthy and you're coming out like, I've only been in there for a while, I've got neck ache and back ache, bench is probably too low. You know, it should be, so you're going to need to boost it up. All right. And the other thing is, you know, that you could get wrong is just getting too obsessed by what a certain individual says, that you might think, oh, I really like that individual and I follow what they're doing. And just thinking that they have a number or a theory that's going to suit you, which is why I think that book's so great. It says, hey, you're all different heights, all do different work, so you have to try and tailor it to yourself. You're doing this, not anybody else. So I hope that's pretty useful if you're thinking of building a bench. And I've got some timber put aside that I'd love to make a bench for you next year if I get the time, but you know, we'll see what happens. No big promises. Yeah, don't overthink it. And I say I would come to where you are, sort of top of the wristwatch, something like that, and just have a go. And if you're an experienced woodworker, you've got all this figured out anyway. All right. So that's proved interesting, and catch you soon.